Returning to our story, here again is Dennis Murphy.
Meredith Emerson and her lab Ella were 2 days missing on Georgia's Blood Mountain early in a freezing January of 2007. Her friends had alerted the authorities, and people from all over the greater Atlanta area were scouring the hiking trails. So many volunteers, they couldn't use all of them.
People just showed up and just said, I have a daughter who likes to hike, I have a sister who could have been Meredith easily, and they just volunteer their time.
But the search in the National Forest had become something more ominous than a lost hiker incident. Meredith had been last seen in the company of an unsavory-looking stranger, and law enforcement was about to identify him. The tip came from John Tabor, an Atlanta businessman. He was watching the continuing news coverage of missing Meredith during his morning workout.
When they started giving the description of the person of interest, my ears really perked up. I think I just turned white at one point. I felt the blood leave my face.
Tabor, the businessman, thought this has got to be Gary Hilton. Hilton was a guy who'd worked on and off for him for years, first as a telemarketer, then as an independent contractor in a siding business. He even lived for a while in this little house that Tabor owned.
What was the thought that was taking shape as you're listening to this?
The first thing that really got my attention is where the event happened, where she went missing, Blood Mountain. I knew that was a place he liked to hang out, that he had a dog with him, and most importantly was the evidence that they had found at the scene. I knew Hilton always had an expendable police baton with him.
The tip and a name quickly led to a Georgia driver's license for 61-year-old Gary Michael Hilton. Investigators showed the photo to hikers who ID'd him as the scruffy mystery man seen with Meredith on Blood Mountain. The manhunt was on.
We put that name and face out.
And it's plastered all over the metro Atlanta area.
It is.
The APB went well beyond the Georgia border. Hilton's name and picture were all over the regional news. Light bulbs began going off to the south around Tallahassee, Florida's capital, when people there saw his photo on TV. The search for Gary Hilton was about to widen. The mystery man, person of interest in the Meredith Emerson case, looked familiar to people who thought they'd seen him just about the time they'd learned of the sad case of another woman who'd gone missing, Cheryl Dunlap, a nurse and mother. When Cheryl didn't turn up for church one December Sunday in 2007 and then missed her Sunday school class, red flags went up. Next-door neighbor and friend Tanya Land.
Sunday morning at church, I turned around and looked at her usual spot, and she wasn't there.
And she didn't teach her classes?
She didn't.
And immediately, we knew something was wrong, because that's just not like her.
Everyone who knew her agreed. 46-year-old Cheryl was reliable, a woman solid in her faith and set in her habits. Her fellow nurse friend and prayer partner, Laura Walker.
She always liked to hear what we call our praise reports, like something good that happened with a patient or a co-worker.
When Monday morning rolled around and Tanya still hadn't been able to reach Cheryl, she walked next door.
I went back down to her house and saw that the dog was at the house, but the car was gone, so I called her office several times and they hadn't seen her.
Cheryl's daughter-in-law, Tabitha, called the sheriff's office to report her missing.
When Tanya said she didn't show up for work, I knew that there was a problem.
After that missing persons report was filed, the friends heard about a car that looked like Cheryl's spotted on the side of the highway leading into Tallahassee. They headed up there.
It was Cheryl's car, and immediately they sent a deputy up there and just took over from that point.
Are you apprehensive?
Yeah, I was very uneasy. I knew that there was something wrong.
Yeah. Cheryl's car was parked well off the highway. Florida Department of Law Enforcement agent Annie White.
It was pretty clear from the beginning that that's not someplace that she would have parked it, as well as the tire looked like it had been purposely flattened on the vehicle.
An abandoned car, a slashed tire.
Lord, where is she?
Searchers, law enforcement, volunteers began fanning out into the adjacent 57,000-acre Apalachicola National Forest, all of them with dread in their hearts.
I would be devastated if something like this happened to my family, and so that's why I want to be out here and try to help as much as I can.
There were massive searches in town. Thousands of people showed up to comb the woods looking for her. It was clear very early on that this was unusual for her. She would not have gotten in the car with someone. She just was not the person who would have disappeared.
Tallahassee Democrat senior writer Jennifer Portman covered the story.
We're talking about North Florida in the Panhandle area. People are bound by their schools, by their family, by their churches.
And Sunday school teachers with children and a grandchild don't go missing.
That's exactly right.
Her friends and family were as baffled as the police by Cheryl's disappearance. Law enforcement was trying to put the pieces together. When they looked into Cheryl's background, nothing jumped out at them. 2 sons, a long settled divorce, no boyfriends. Then, on Tuesday, 4 days after she was last seen, the cops got her bank records. Something was up.
We found where some ATM activity had occurred in Leon County.
So that's a big break.
Yes, sir. And then upon viewing that video in Leon County, it was clear it was not her. This was a male subject using her card. He was disguising his face. So we knew at that point definitely that it was probably not going to be a good outcome for Miss Dunlap.
The disguised man made 3 separate withdrawals of $700. The ATM he tapped was in downtown Tallahassee near the campus of the State U, miles from where Cheryl's car was found.
So you and the team stake out the ATM machine.
We stayed there several days, day and night, watching the ATM, and he never came back to that one.
The search for Cheryl stretched on for weeks.
A lot of us went out on our own and searched the woods and went to places we thought, she could possibly be.
But the more time goes on, inevitably,
I just
the
remember
fear sinks in.
Just sleepless nights, just because I'm thinking if she's still alive and someone has her, she's afraid.
Mid-December, 2 weeks after Cheryl disappeared, some hunters out training their dogs in the National Forest noticed a vulture circling in the sky above them.
And went to check it out and discovered the body.
A female body missing its head and hands, a grisly fact not released at the time.
You'd think that this is someone trying to conceal the identity.
Very much.
It took a DNA sample from her toothbrush to identify the remains as those of Cheryl Dunlap.
Someone called and said, Laura, they found a body. We pulled over on the side of the road and just.
That was it, huh?
Yeah.
The awareness was there.
It was surreal. It's, the thing you hear about in movies. But it was so close to home that in our small community that something like this could happen.
Now with cops in Florida looking hard at Gary Hilton in the Dunlap murder, and counterparts in Georgia convinced that he'd taken Meredith Emerson, authorities started hearing about yet another National Forest homicide, this one in North Carolina.
So then you got to be saying, all your team of investigators, what do we have here?
That's right. And so now we're really wondering who we have here and where is he? And more importantly, where's Meredith?
Coming up.
Do we have a killer running around loose in the National Forest?
Concern for Meredith deepens, but her friends know something that man on the mountain couldn't.
A blue belt in Aikido and a blue belt in Judo. If anybody could survive it, it was Meredith.
When Mystery on Blood Mountain continues.